Shema Yisrael, Yahu Eloheinu, Yahu Echad. Baruch Shem Kebod Malkotho Leholam Voed.
Shalom, everyone. I am the Chief Magician of Mystery Babylon, and welcome to my holy channel. And today I'm going to be doing a very powerful video on Rab Nachman and some very astounding, explosive revelations regarding Rab Nachman. And I have a special guest with me today, my most senior chief disciple, Hadar, who's been, on with me in the past several videos I've uploaded a while ago. So hopefully all of you have come to get to kind of know him a bit through my videos. So I'm very excited to have him. And so I just want to start off with a very brief exordium before I get into the essence of the matter. So as I've said repeatedly in my writings and in previous videos, the number one major problem that we have in the West is that we don't have any real, true, authentic Kabbalists on the scene. And unfortunately, practically no one is aware of this issue, right? And I want to highlight it here and I want to give you a very powerful example, because the vast majority of Kabbalists, even in the past, 700 years or so, have not been real authentic Kabbalists. What many Jews consider to be master Kabbalists are in fact not real, true, authentic Kabbalists. And I'll give you a perfect example. Moshe Cordovero. Moshe Cordovero is seen as a Grandmaster Kabbalist by practically every Jew that you will speak to or that you will know. The reality is that I don't consider Moshe Cordovero a true, authentic Kabbalist, because the actual real, true Kabbalists belong to the secret holy order, and there are only a handful of them. And real, true, authentic Kabbalah is not known at all. And I'm the only real, authentic, true Kabbalist in this last generation. There are no other true, authentic Kabbalists out there. This is a fact. It's a very inconvenient truth. Many of you may not believe this. It doesn't matter. Okay, these are the facts. Okay, and I have Hashem who will back me on this. Okay, I descend from the actual, real, true, authentic Grandmasters that go back to medieval Spain. The actual true Grandmasters that resided in Spain, I descend from that bloodline, and I'm a royal Merovingian. So I have all of the keys. Okay, the problem is that the principal texts of the Kabbalah are highly encrypted. And it was only the true Grandmasters that had the keys to completely decrypt them. Okay, so what happened was that when the principal text of Zohar was revealed, that caused a lot of Jews to rush to it and study it. But that doesn't make you a real, true, authentic Kabbalist. Moshe Cordovero didn't belong to the Holy Order. He was just a very brilliant Jew that came into possession of the Zohar and, began to study it, And his masters and teachers were also initiated into the Kabbalah through the principal text. That does not make you a true, authentic Kabbalist if you are initiated through the principal text. It has to be done orally through the actual, true, original Grandmasters, okay? Of which I'm the only last standing one in this last generation. There aren't really any others out there. There may be a few out there, but they're hidden. They're concealed. Nobody knows about them, okay? I'm the only actual, true, authentic Kabbalist that's out in the open, okay? And so that's a problem that we have. So we don't really have any true, authentic Kabbalah being taught and preached, in the West. Another major problem that we have is that we have a few very brilliant, genius scholars in Israel that are doing groundbreaking research, into the Kabbalah, but they're publishing a lot of their academic papers in Hebrew. And in the West, we don't have really any Kabbalists, authentic Kabbalists that are fluent in Hebrew and that have access to these texts and are reading them and presenting them, to the public. That's where I come in, because, I'm fluent in Hebrew. I read a lot of these academic papers that are coming out of Israel, and I sometimes, every now and then, I post these revelations on my blog. And so, that's also what makes me stand apart from everyone else. Okay, so again, all in all, to summarize here, right, we have a major issue. We don't have real, authentic Kabbalah being preached and taught, because all of the Kabbalistic texts are, at least the principal texts, are highly encrypted. And it was only the Grandmasters that had the keys to decrypt them. There aren't any books out there that decrypt, these texts. Now, we have a couple of divine men, Shabbatai and Yaakov Frank, that came on the scene. These were true divine grandmasters, and if you belong to their esoteric orders, then you would be highly initiated and possess those keys, like myself. But again, there's no one in this last generation. There isn't anyone that belongs to these orders, anymore. They've largely died out, and yeah, there will be a few Grandmaster Frankists out there, but again, they're concealed and hidden. The handful of Grandmasters that are out there, they're concealed and hidden. They're underground. Nobody knows about them. Okay, I'm the only one that's above ground, that is fully visible and open and on the scene, despite the fact that nobody even knows who I am. Sadly enough, nobody even knows of my existence. Okay, which is really sad, but it is what it is. Now, another point that I want to mention that's very important is the one scholar who I have the highest respect and honor for is Yehuda Leibs. And the guy is a genius. And other than me, I truly consider him a real true Grandmaster Kabbalist. I think he's the only other Grandmaster apart from me out there, that's on the scene that I could say, yeah, you know what, this guy qualifies as a Grandmaster. He's not the highest level Grandmaster, but he's like at level 0, level 1 Grandmaster. He's just barely entered into that domain of being a Grandmaster. Okay, the guy is that sharp, that genius, that impressive. Okay, now what's really sad is that a lot of Orthodox religious Jews and even Kabbalists do not respect Yehuda Leibs. They scorn him, they mock him, and they reject him, and they reject his scholarship. Why? Because religious Jews are, for the most part, brainwashed. They belong to a cult without knowing it. Orthodox Judaism is a satanic cult. I know some of you may not understand this, you may not believe this, you may think I'm talking crazy right now. If you're fully initiated like I am, you know that Orthodox Judaism is a satanic cult. Not in the sense that you may think of, oh, they're doing orgies, they're doing Luciferian rituals. No, I don't mean it in that sense. I mean it in the sense that they worship the inferior demiurge. Okay? They're a satanic cult that worships the inferior demiurge, and they are brainwashed. They are some of the most brainwashed people on the planet, sadly enough, and they don't realize this, okay? And they're very biased. Yehuda Leibs is the most objective scholar that we have on the scene. He is doing the most groundbreaking research into the Kabbalah and has academic papers that reveal some of the most powerful, highest keys to the esoteric Kabbalah. The guy, like I said, is a grandmaster. Okay, he's at the grandmaster level. Okay, and he's very objective, and he's doing groundbreaking, powerful, explosive research on the Kabbalah. It's just very sad that the West is unaware of this because they don't know Hebrew. They're not fluent in Hebrew. Okay, and so that's why he's rejected, because he comes with the truth. Religious Jews who are brainwashed and belong to a cult can't see the truth, and they have no choice but to reject it, scorn it, and mock it. So they mock Yehuda Leibs and they reject him. We saw the same thing with Yeshua. We saw the same thing with Shabbatai Zvi. We see the same thing with Yaakov Frank. And now we even see the same thing with me. Most religious Jews think I'm crazy. They see me as a full-blown heretic. They probably mock me. They scorn me, just like they do Yehuda Leibs. Because when you come out speaking the truth and you're very objective, people who are brainwashed, who belong to a cult, are not going to be able to see it, understand it, unfortunately. It's like if you go to a Jew and you tell them that Jesus is the Messiah, they're so brainwashed, they're so ignorant, they're like, no, Jesus is not the Messiah, and they're going to curse you. They curse Jesus, they curse you, they think you're a fool, they mock you, they spit at you. This is the brainwashed cult of Orthodox Judaism that is very inferior, okay? And unless you're a grandmaster and highly initiated like myself, you're not going to understand this. You're not going to see this, okay? Now, the purpose of this video is to reveal how Rav Nachman was a full-blown Grandmaster Frankist, something that is not known. We have, what, maybe over 100,000 Breslovers out there. The Breslov Hasidic sect is a very large Jewish sect. And the vast majority of these Breslovers don't even know the truth. They don't even fully know and understand their own master, Rav Nachman, that he was a full-blown Grandmaster Frankist. Now, I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen because we're going to start getting into this really crazy stuff here. Okay, so where do I begin? Let's see here. Okay. So can you see my screen, Hadar?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, Breslavers don't realize this, right? And Yehuda Leibs, actually, let me go to the paper here. I think this is the paper. No, this is not it. So this is the paper I'm showing here on my screen. This is a recent paper that Yehuda Leibs wrote on Nachman and his affiliation and connection to Shabbathianism and Frankism. So this is 111 very scholarly, formal academic paper where Yehuda Leibs shows and actually proves that indeed Nachman was, a Shabbathian Frankist of the highest order. It is a brilliant, genius paper. Now, again, the West is not aware of this. They don't know about this because, again, they're not fluent in Hebrew. They don't know who the top scholars are. There's just a tremendous amount of ignorance in the West when it comes to real, authentic Kabbalah. As I'm always saying, there's no real, authentic teachers of Kabbalah in the West for the most part. Yeah, you have some teachers that are going to teach you some basic Zohar, maybe some basic Lurianic Kabbalah, but like real, full-blown, esoteric, authentic Kabbalah at the Grandmaster level, no, there's no one out there in the West doing it other than me. I'm the only one. I'm the highest Jew in this last generation. I'm the highest Jew in the land, okay? Get with the program, okay? If you're new to my channel, this is the first time you're watching this video, you got a lot of research to do about me to get to the full truth of who I am, what I'm about, and what I'm doing in this last generation. So you need to get up to speed, okay? So, powerful paper here. If you're fluent in Hebrew, I'm sure many of you coming here probably not, but if you are, this is definitely a paper you want to read. So, I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. I got a number of seals and proofs that we're going to get into here, proving and showing that indeed Rab Nachman was a Frankist Grandmaster of the highest order. So I want to first begin in his magnus opus Likutei Moharan. We're in part 2, 515 here, and there's some very, very powerful stuff that he says here. So I want to begin reading here what he says. So, I guess I'll start here in line 24. This is very explosive where he says, it may even be necessary to behave in ways and do things that seem mad in order to serve God, as in you will be insane with the love of her always. So let me go ahead and put the Hebrew here. This is very important. So on account of people's love for God, they have to be willing to do things that seem crazy in order to fulfill his commandments and carry out his will. They have to be willing to roll around in all sorts of mud and mire for the sake of his worship and his mitzvot. This does not apply to an explicit mitzvah. Anything that bears God's will is called a mitzvah. And he goes on. Now, this is very powerful because this teaching is a full-blown Shabbathian Frankist teaching. It's the mystery of Ma'azeh, Ma'asim Zarim. It's the mystery of strange deeds. Okay? This is the mystery of the strange deeds that Shabbatai Zvi did, the strange deeds that Yeshua HaMashiach did, the strange deeds that HaMashiach Yaakov Frank did. Okay? They were seen as very antinomian, as very strange. Why? Why were they doing these strange deeds? It was out of love for God, as he's explaining here. Now, if you go to Proverbs 5:19 here, the verse that he cites, okay. So let's go here. Yeah, so if you read the verse here, right, the verse begins with a loving doe. Now we know that the Hebrew word here, elath, is the mystery of Shekhinah. A loving doe, to anyone who's initiated, any basic initiate and adept knows that the doe is the mystery of Shekhinah. It starts here, Shekhinah, let her breasts satisfy you at all times. Be infatuated with love of her always. Now, the word here that is used is when it says here, be infatuated with the love of her always, the underlying Hebrew here is be'ahabata tishge hamid. Okay, so the word here tishge, it's a very special Hebrew word here, tishge, because it comes from the root shaga, which means to err. It actually comes from a root meaning to err, okay, to make a mistake. You know, so there's every Hebrew word is polysemous. So there's many levels of meaning to this word, but at its core meaning, this comes from a root meaning to err. You could even say to sin. It's very closely related to the word to sin, to err, to make a mistake. Um, so there's just so much mysticism packed into this verse, and that's what he's getting at here. He's diving there. He is explaining the most esoteric level to this verse in this passage here in Likutei Moharan, which again goes back to the Ma'aseh Zarim, the strange deeds of the Mashiachim, and how if you're gonna become initiated to the highest levels, you have to enter this antinomian domain of the Mashiach. Okay, it's very powerful stuff. Is there anything you want to add to here, Hadar?
Not right now.
Okay, so this is very powerful stuff here. Okay, so basically right here, this is our first most high seal and proof that Rav Nachman was a Frankist Grandmaster, because the mysteries that he is alluding to here have to do with Frankist mysteries, Gnostic Frankist mysteries. Okay, so hopefully by now you can begin to understand how ridiculously deep and profound this passage goes. Okay, so very, very powerful passage here. Very, very Frankist. If you have eyes to see, if you have a high SQ, a high IQ, very Frankist passage. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get out of this passage. Okay, so then I want to go to the next passage here, which I think Yehuda Liebs in his paper cites this passage as being a very, very subtle, interesting passage. Okay. So here in Likutei Moharan 2071, he begins by saying, when people do not mitigate the fierce severities, God forbid, it is either because they lack the ability to mitigate them or cannot mitigate them since they are not on a low level due to some blemish or sin they committed. For even great tzaddikim occasionally blemish and err in some matter, for there is no man on earth so righteous that he does good and never sins. And because they are then in that aspect, they do not mitigate the fierce severities, which is the Geburoth, which are the words. And when they fail to mitigate the words, which are fierce severities, then with these words they begin to speak evil about people generally and about specific individuals. Alternatively, they speak about the tzaddik of the generation. Then all of their words, which are fierce and severities, affect and beset the tzaddik of the generation, God forbid. So let's try to understand what he's saying here. He's saying, when they fail to mitigate the words of the Geburoth, then with these words, they begin to speak evil about people generally and about specific individuals. Alternatively, they speak about the tzaddik of the generation. So right here, he's talking about the tzaddik of the generation and speaking evil about the tzaddik of the generation. Keep this in mind. He goes on by saying, thus the tzaddik of the generation must seek to mitigate these fierce geburoth, which are the aforementioned words, by virtue of his judging these people positively in this, that they speak about him. We may conclude that he inclines toward chesed. With this, he mitigates them, or by virtue of his accepting with love the suffering that stems from their speaking about him, he likewise mitigates their words, which are the fierce severities as explained above. However, if the tzaddik of the generation lacks the ability to mitigate them, God forbid, then he can fall greatly from his level because of the aforementioned severities that affect him, or this might cause him to pass away altogether, God forbid. Then through this passing, his soul mitigates these aforementioned fierce geburoth. It was from this that the Baal Shem Tov passed away, for he said he would pass away because of the episode of Shabbatai Zvi, may his name be obliterated. Among the followers of Shabbatai Zvi, may his name be obliterated, there were a number of generations leaders and outstanding scholars who he deceived, as is widely known. They disassociated themselves from the community and spoke evil of the entire oral law. This was because they were affected by the fierce geburoth, which they did not mitigate due to the aforementioned aspect. They therefore spoke evil words about the people generally, and these words beset the leader of the generation. The Baal Shem Tov of blessed memory was then the generation's leader, and he passed away from this. This is, as they say in the Baal Shem Tov's name, he said that he had 2 holes in his heart as a result of the episode of Shabbatai Zvi. May his name be obliterated, and it was from this that he passed away, as explained above. Now, Yehuda Lieb cites it as a very interesting passage because what Rab Nachman is doing here is he's actually highlighting the inferiority of the Baal Shem Tov. Yehuda Lieb notes this very, very well. I also noted this well. It should go without saying that much of what Yehuda Lieb reveals in this paper I already know because I'm a Frankist Grandmaster. It's just very interesting that here you have a very objective, sublime scholar who is discovering very profound truths that were already known and have already been known to all of the Frankist Grandmasters, such as myself. Okay, so we both duly note here that Rab Nachman is citing how inferior the Baal Shem Tov was, that he was not able to mitigate what occurred in the generation of Shabbatai Zvi. Now, it's very interesting that he refers to Shabbatai Zvi by saying Yimach Shmo, which is Hebrew for may his name be erased. That's the same phrase that is used to refer to Yeshua. Yimach Shmo. Now, you have to understand that the elite Shabbatarians, a lot of them were, after Shabbatai Zvi passed away, the vast majority of elite Shabbatarians went underground and they began to write in code. So anytime they wrote about Shabbatarianism, they would write in code. They would say bad things about Shabbatarianism deliberately as part of the code, but they themselves did not believe these things that they wrote. This is just the way they wrote. They wrote in coded terms. So they would reveal powerful mysteries in their books, while at the same time, speaking bad about Shabbatai Zvi and Shabbatarianism in general, but they only did that to conceal themselves, to be covert. We can Yehuda Lieb kind of sees that in this writing in the original Hebrew, that Rab Nachman is writing in a covert style here, especially given the fact that he is sort of, speaking to the inferiority of the Baal Shem Tov here, right? What Rab Nachman is doing is saying, I'm superior because I know how to tikkun, how to rectify Shabbatarianism and Frankism. I know how to deal with what Nachman is saying here is, I'm the chosen one, and I can rectify Shabbatarianism and Shabbatarianism because I fully understand them and I know what's going on. The Baal Shem Tov was very inferior here, and he was not able to rectify Shabbatarianism and Frankism. He didn't know, he was waiting over his head, didn't know what the hell he was doing, and he died because he was very inferior. This is very powerful. I mean, Yehuda Lieb, is like, most people don't fully understand the implications and the ramifications of what Rab Nachman is actually truly saying here. This is very, very deep, profound passage here. And again, he refers to Shabbatai Zvi as, through the phrase Yimach Shmo. Now we're going to get back to this phrase Yimach Shmo and why it is so critical and momentous in reference to the Mashiachim. Okay, just because Rab Nachman says Yimach Shmo here, you have to be stupid and very ignorant if you think that he is, speaking ill of Shabbatai Zvi. Okay, again, this is an encrypted passage here. You have to be very highly initiated to understand what he is actually truly saying here and what's really going on underneath the surface here. Hadar, is there anything you want to add to this?
No.
No? Okay. Okay, so this is another very powerful, very interesting, powerful passage here. Unfortunately, this passage here has practically gone over the heads of every Jew reading it. This is just a fact. I think because Yehuda Lieb and myself, we have very high IQs, very high SQs. We can kind of see, we can read between the lines, penetrate below the surface and see what's really being said here. Okay. The next passage to me is just a crazy, crazy, explosive passage. It begins in Likutei Moharan, chapter 16. And this is a very explosive passage. This is one of the most Shabbatarian and Frankist passages in all of Likutei Moharan. So it begins by saying, He's basically here commenting on a very enigmatic passage in Talmud Babli. He begins by saying, "We saw this fish." This is referring to, if I go up here, let me see if it says me. Yeah, so here is where he begins the commentary to the passage in Talmud Babli. Unfortunately, they didn't cite it here. Oh, it's in Baba Batra. So he's referring, this is the passage in Baba Batra, folio 74a. This section in Baba Batra is full of very, very enigmatic passages of the highest order. I mean, you have to be a grandmaster to fully understand this entire long section in Baba Batra, and he's commenting here, revealing some of the highest keys and mysteries to this passage. There's this particular small passage in Baba Batra. Begins by saying, "We saw this fish," and he says, "This is the tzaddik who is called a fish, as is known." Any basic initiate and adept knows that the fish is an occult term for the tzaddik. It's also an occult term for the Mashiach, which has raised its head out of the water. His eyes resembled two moons, and he spread out water from his two nostrils like the two rivers of Surah. This is again going back to the passage in Baba Batra. "For it is impossible for the tzaddik to always ponder upper wisdoms. There are times when he has to move outside of these wisdoms and occupy himself with mundane matters, as our sages taught." Going on, he says, I'll just skip down here below. He says, "His eyes resembled two moons." Opening the eyes is an expression which indicates wisdom, as in Bereshit 3:7, and the eyes of the both of them were open. When he's occupied with wisdom, then his eyes correspond to the sun. But when he removes himself from upper wisdom, it is comparable to the sun having set. Okay, we'll go a little bit down here. A little bit down here. Okay. Then here he begins by saying, "Hinafitz," which means he sprouted out water from his two nostrils. This alludes to the two Mashiachim, whom the Gentiles will seek out and be drawn to, as it is written, "And all the nations shall flow unto him," quoting Yeshayahu 2:2. Now, this is very interesting because has there ever been a messianic figure to whom all the Goyim have been attracted to? Of course, it's Yeshua. Yeshua is the only messianic figure that all the Goyim have flocked to and been attracted to. Why? Because he is the Mashiach. Rob Nachman knows this. That's what he's hinting to and alluding to here. Of course, every Jew is too stupid and ignorant to understand this. Goes on to say, the two rivers of Surah. Surah alludes to the Gentiles on account of their idolatry, as it is written in Shemot 32:8. Saru, they strayed quickly from the path. The Gentiles are embodied in two nations, Esav and Ishmael, and through these two Mashiachim, who are the two nostrils corresponding to the breath of our noses, the Mashiach of God, the Gentiles will be redeemed, and they will be drawn to them to learn the word of God. And the two nations, Esav and Ishmael, are the two clouds which cover the eyes, so that they cannot always shine like the sun. Because of this, the tzaddik has to set aside his resolute cleaving to wisdom, so that the nations of Esav and Ishmael do not overpower his eyes and nullify his wisdom entirely, God forbid. But through the two Mashiachim, whose well springs will spread forth, quoting Proverbs chapter 5, verse 16, they will all be transferred to a pure tongue. Then the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun, and the tzaddik will no longer have to set aside his cleaving. Now, here he says there are two Mashiachim corresponding to Esav and Ishmael. What does that mean? That means that these Mashiachim have to come out from Esav and Ishmael. What Mashiach came out of Esav? Yeshua. What Mashiach came out of Ishmael? Muhammad, the prophet. What Mashiachim entered Esav and Ishmael to rectify them? Shabbatai Zvi and Yaakov Frank. There is a very powerful secret reason why he connects the two Mashiachim to Esav and Yishmael. You have to be very stupid, very blind, very ignorant if you cannot see this connection. Now, it's very interesting that Yehuda Leaves in his paper cites some scholars that believe that this passage was censored. Okay? He has reason to believe that this passage was censored based on citations from other Hasidic works. So, there is another Hasidic work that cites this passage a little differently, according to these scholars. And this passage is more of an explicit passage that is more Frankist and more Shabbathian in nature. So there's a number of scholars, Yehuda Leibs included, who have duly recognized that, hey, you know what? There's a Breslov Hasidic text that cites this passage more explicitly in a much more Frankist Shabbathian explicit manner, indicating that this passage was censored, because you can already see from reading this passage the Frankist and Shabbathian undertones. Now I'm going to go to that other passage here. I think I have it here. Where do I have it? No. Here it is. Okay, you know what? I gotta find it now. I need to get my Hebrew up. Is it? I gotta type some Hebrew here to find it. Okay, here we go. So here's the passage. So this is in a Breslov Hasidic text called Sefer Parparot LeChochma. And here is in the passage, I'll translate the underlying Hebrew here. So he begins by saying, let's hear. He said, and then there exist 70 nations, and they are included in Esau and Yishmael. I mean, any initiate and adept knows this. And this includes 35 nations, and it also includes another 35 nations. And in the time to come, these two Mashiachim will conquer them. This is the Mashiach ben Yosef and the Mashiach ben David. And there exists one Tzaddik who includes both of these Mashiachim together. Okay? So here, again, this passage is a little bit more explicit in connecting these two Mashiachim to Esau and Ishmael and how they're going to conquer them, which means that these two Mashiachim have to enter these domains. That means that we have to have two Mashiachim that will have to enter these two domains of Esau and Ishmael, that is Christianity and Islam. So question, have there been any powerful Messianic figures that actually entered these two religions to rectify them? Yes. Shabbatai Zvi, who entered Islam, and Yaakov Frank, who entered Christianity. So you can see how this is a little bit more of an explicit passage now. I think there's another passage that the scholars cite as well. I'm not really sure. I didn't have access to all of the citations that Yehuda Leibs provided. But nevertheless, if you have a high SQ and IQ, you can see here how this is a pretty Frankist and Shabbathian passage. I mean, if you're highly initiated, it becomes a little bit more obvious. And now this verse that Rav Nachman cites from Proverbs 5:16, which in the Hebrew says, Ya futsu. Yeah, go ahead, say it, Hadar. Yeah. So this, which means your springs will gush forth outside. The Hebrew word hutsa, outside. Now it's very interesting because the Baal Shem Tov is the first on record as stating that this verse, that the Mashiach, I think he said the Mashiach, when the Mashiach appeared to him, the Mashiach cited this verse in reference to himself. So this is a messianic verse. It's duly noted that the initial letters of this verse spell Yimak, as in Yimak Shmo, meaning that this is a reference to Yeshua and it going outside. It says here that thy fountains will go outside, and in ancient Aramaic, going outside is equated with harlotry and whoredom, very teleptically in reference to the antinomianism of the Mashiachim. Is there anything else you want to add to this, Hadar?
I want to add that generally the exteriority is viewed as it is viewed as is a state of explicitness, right? In contrast to the interiority, which is a state of inhibition or constriction of oneself into oneself. When he goes to the outside, he embodies himself in the exterior domain of what you can call the field. For example, the field, Sadeh is translated in the Targum, for example, in Genesis 3. The field is translated as bara, the outside, the wilderness, right? So when we're talking about the outside, we connect that to the field, which is the antitype of the house. And we've talked about it a little bit in our previous videos. But the point is that there are lots of references both in the New Testament and in the Old Testament to the going outside into the field, being equated with going outside to the place of the Garden of Eden, right? Because the Garden of Eden is on the highest level of understanding is that the Garden of Eden is the antitype of the land of Israel. Usually people see them as complementary, as complementing each other and being two aspects of the same substance, but in fact they're antitypes. So Yafut Ma'anot also refers to the return to the Garden of Eden, basically.
Yeah, what's important to understand here is that the Hebrew word chutzah in ancient Hebrew and Aramaic has a very, very negative connotation and is associated with harlotry and whoredom, antinomianism. And this is what connects antinomianism to the Mashiachim, and why the Mashiachim are rejected and why they are misunderstood by the masses and the profane. Now, again, it should not be lost. The fact that the initial letters of this verse spell Yemach is ridiculously momentous. There are so many holy mysteries behind this matter. It's not even funny. Okay. Now, what's his name? Cohen Arroyo. I'm sure many of you know who Cohen Arroyo is, becoming famous in Israel. In trying to rectify Yeshua HaMashiach to the Jews, to the Orthodox Jews. So he's written a couple of books, and he dives very deep into this word Yemach. Okay, this word Yemah, he dives very deep into it. He connects it to a very sublime, very esoteric, sublime key in Freemasonry. We know it's related to Yemach Shmo, which is a reference to Yeshua, Shabbatai Zvi, and Yaakov Frank. Very interestingly, the word Yemah is also one of the 72 divine names. This is very powerful because when the Orthodox Jews say Yemach Shmo, what are they saying? They're saying that Yemach is his name. When you say Yemach Shmo, on the very esoteric level, you are saying that the name of the Mashiach is Yemah. And Yemah is one of the 72 divine names. So you are connecting one of the 72 divine names with Yeshua, with Shabbatai Zvi and Yaakov Frank. Okay, now you don't think Rav Nachman knew all these mysteries? Of course he did. Of course he knew that the initial letters of this verse spell Yemach, so did the Baal Shem Tov, and clearly that equates it and connects it to Yeshua HaMashiach. Okay? So again, a lot of mysteries here, okay? Even in this passage in Likutei Moran, that he connects the Mashiach to this verse like the Baal Shem Tov did. There's just so many mysteries. I can't fully unravel all of them here, okay? But I've already unraveled some ridiculously sublime mysteries nonetheless, okay? So let's move on to the next passage here. So the next one is very powerful. So if you read the words of Yaakov Frank, there are a lot of passages where he calls himself a prostic. Okay, he's Yaakov Frank in his great attempt to be very humble. He's always appearing very humble. He's like, "Oh, I'm not a Rab, I'm not a genius, I'm not a master Kabbalist. I'm just a very simple man. I'm an ignoramus." Prostic, I think, is it Polish or is it Yiddish? Do you know Yaakov Frank? I can't remember if it's Polish or Yiddish.
Prostak is like a fool.
Yeah,
Or,
but is it Yiddish or is it Polish?
it is Yiddish. Yeah. it's
Yeah, Yiddish. Okay, I thought so. It's Yiddish. Um. So yeah. So Yaakov Frank is always calling himself a prostic, which is Yiddish for like an ignoramus or a simple man. And it's very interesting because Shabbatai Zvi, he would always, in his signature, he would always sign as "I'm a great fool." Shabbatai Zvi would always refer to himself as like a great fool, a great ignoramus. And Yaakov Frank followed in that same tradition because there is a very esoteric, it's very, very secret. This is a very, very, very esoteric ancient tradition going back thousands of years that the Mashiach will basically be a simple ignoramus, or he will like himself to a simple ignoramus. And we see this with Shabbatai Zvi, who called himself a great fool. And we see this with Yaakov Frank, who also called himself a great fool or a prostic. Okay. Now, this mystery is actually in Proverbs. Dang, I want to see what how do you spell it? I think it's Bor. Yeah, I think it's Beor. See if I can find it. Um, I think it's Proverbs. Why isn't that? It's in Proverbs.
What do you want to search for?
The verse in Proverbs that uses the word Beor for fool.
Bor
Yeah, I
without
think.
ein. Without ein. It's without ein.
What?
Without ein.
Oh, really? I could have sworn it's with Ein. I could have sworn it's with Ein, but let me check. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's not without the Ein. See here. I could have sworn it was without it, but here we go. No, I'm pretty sure it's with the 9. I know it's with the 9. Okay, let me try without the Vav. Maybe if I do it without the Vav. Nothing.
There it is.
I know it's with the Vav. I know it's with the Vav. Maybe. Dang, what is the verse? I want to say it was like in Proverbs 31. Oh, here we go. Yes, I found it. So this very ancient esoteric tradition is based in Proverbs, verse 2. Now, in Proverbs in chapter 30, verse 1, it says the words of Agor, son of Yake. I guess they're trying to hear Masa, the speech of the man to Ithiel, and Uchal. So, according to certain ancient sages and even Kabbalists, the first verse is a very esoteric reference to the Mashiach. They teach that Agor ben Yake is the mystery of the Mashiach. And so then verse 2 is also the Mashiach speaking, because he says, because I am a brutish, less than a man. I lack common sense. Now, that's how they translate it here. It's not the best translation. And then it goes on to say, I have not learned wisdom, nor do I possess knowledge of the Holy One. So the Mashiachim, when they appear as fools, when they appear as ignoramuses, it is based on this ancient oracle in Proverbs 30 verses 1 to 3. That's what they're referencing. This is what Yaakov. This is the Mashiach right here. You have a very encrypted reference to the Mashiach and what they would appear like, how they're going to speak. They're going to say, "I'm a fool. I'm an ignoramus. I don't have wisdom." That's how Yaakov Frank presented himself. That's how Shabbatai Zvi presented himself, and that's even how Yeshua in certain instances expressed himself as well. Okay, but here you have in Likutei Moharan, part 278, you have Rab Nachman. He says, at times the true tzaddik is genuinely an ordinary person called a prostic, comporting himself in ways of simplicity. He does not reveal any Torah teachings, but engages in everyday conversations and the like, and so then resembles a genuinely ordinary person. And this is exactly what we see in the writings of Yaakov Frank, because Yaakov Frank, this is exactly how he comported himself. And he called himself a prostic. He's the only messianic figure and tzaddik that ever referred to himself and called himself a prostic. Do you know of any other Kabbalist, any other tzaddik who ever referred to himself or called himself a prostic other than Yaakov Frank? No! There are no any others. Please tell me. And here you have Rab Nachman saying the tzaddik is a prostic, and very, very esoteric reference to Yaakov Frank. Do you see it? Do you have a high IQ and high SQ? Can you see this? It is so obvious. Very powerful here. Do you have anything to add to this, Sodar?
I want to add, if you want to go to Likutei Moharan, part 2, 104, section 104.
Okay, let me go here. Is it part 1 here?
Second, yeah, this one.
Oh, this one 104. Okay.
Wait, maybe it's not on Torah 104, it's in the second part, yeah.
Oh, second part, okay. Okay, here we go. Okay.
Right. So you see here that one of the central themes in the Likutei Moharan, generally in the corpus of Rabbi Nachman, is the virtue of pshitut. Yeah, pshitut means, it is a word that has a lot of meanings, but it means simplicity, it could mean sincerity, it could mean perfection, and it could mean also unfoldedness or nakedness. Now, in this context, Rabbi Nachman says, can you go down a little bit? Yeah, this one. Go a little bit upwards. Yeah, so he says here that what you need to be as a believer, as a righteous man, as a pious man, is to be completely simple and sincere, without any sophistication, as he has already said numerous times in the Likutei Moharan. He says this in Likutei Moharan and other books of his. He says this repeatedly, that you need to be simple without any sophistication. Bli shum chokhmot. Now, the word for sophistication is chokhmot, which could also mean wisdom. Could also mean wisdom. And sophistication is from the word Sophia, which means wisdom, right? So we understand him as giving you two types that are opposite one to the other. One is simplicity and sincerity, and on the other one, they want of sophistication and wisdom. Now, there's an entire arcanum to the wisdom, right? There's a lot of things that I could start talking about right now, but these are out of the scope of this video. But the point is that the sophistication of the knowledge, and here's already in one of the previous passages that we read, he connects wisdom to the tree of knowledge, right? When he talks about the eyes of the fish, that they are opened, then when they are opened, they're in the mystery of, and the eyes of both of them were opened in Genesis 3:7, right? So what you need to, and there are lots of other seals and proofs that ground the fact that wisdom is linked to the tree of knowledge and to the serpent, right? The serpent is the symbol of wisdom or intelligence. Now, when he tells you you need to be simple and sincere completely without any sophistications, it tells you to be less like the serpent, but also less like what we can call a rational animal. And it tells you to be completely pious to the degree, to the extent where you are completely simple. And the simplicity is understood as a state of sinlessness, because any sophistication is like a coat of sin, a raiment. The wisdom is seen as a raiment. Now, that's one level of the mystery of wisdom. We can also get onto the other levels that are also different than what we said right thus far. But the point is that what he talks when he says about being a prostak, right? Being a simple man or boor or a simpleton. He says about himself, I'm a prostak, I'm a dummy. You know, this is a way in which he exclaims himself to be antitypical to the serpent. So this is it.
Indeed. Okay. So I will get out of this. I think I had already gotten here. Explain that. Okay, next up is another very powerful, super interesting passage. I think this is the only passage in all of his books where he talks about Edom in depth. And see what he says here. So he begins by saying, then Moshe sent Malachim to the king of Edom. And so he's talking about here in the passage in the Torah where the Israelites were trying to pass through Edom. And Moshe sent Malachim, or angels, emissaries to Edom. And there's some very, very powerful secret mysteries behind this that he's going to be explaining here that are very explosive, quite honestly. So he says here, please let us pass through your land, quoting the Torah. And he says they wanted to travel to the land of Israel by way of the power of Edom, so as to receive from him the power to punish the wicked with the sword and with death. This was so that they would be able to travel to the land of Israel on the king's highway, the king of the world, and not for the sake of worldly pleasures. So then he says, I will pay the full price. Okelos translates this as their money. It refers to the bribes, which must be doled out in the Gentile courts in order to have them willingly allow the judgment of holiness to be taken from the crookedness. Okay? He goes on, it is of no devar concern, only with my foot will I pass through. I want to travel and pass through with your power in order to silence the wicked, so that their words do not enter my foot. Okay? So, what Rab Nachman is saying here, okay, on the most esoteric level, is that Edom is used as a tool to punish the wicked. Okay? Now, in his time, in Rab Nachman's generation, there were some very powerful Hasidic Rabbanan that rose up against him and persecuted him and his followers. They claimed that Rab Nachman was a Shabbathian. Okay? We're going to get a little bit deeper into why a lot of the Hasidic Rabbanan that surrounded Rab Nachman, why they accused him of being a Shabbathian and persecuted him and accused him of being a heretic. We're going to get a lot deeper into this as we continue. But what Rab Nachman is teaching here on the most esoteric level is that Edom is a tool that is used to punish the wicked, even the wicked Jews. Because Rab Nachman actually collaborated with the Gentiles and the Christians and paid them bribes to silence his enemies. We know this is on record. Rab Nachman is on record historically as doing this. We know this for a fact, and the scholars have written about this. And this is very Frankist because this is exactly what Jacob Frank did. Jacob Frank collaborated with high-level Christian officials and used them to punish the Jews. He caused them to burn the Talmud and kill and imprison and punish a lot of Orthodox religious Jews in his generation. Jacob Frank, the very tools and methods that Jacob Frank used, Rab Nachman also used. And he is explaining this in this passage right here. And it is duly noted by the scholars. They understand this and they see this. This is explosive. This is really super explosive Frankism in his texts. Because the very same methods that he used against his own Jews with the Christians, Yaakov Frank did as well. You could say Yaakov Frank taught, this is pure Frankism right here. This is pure Frankism right here. This is pure explicit Frankism of the highest order that is being taught here in Likutei Moharan. I cannot tell you how ridiculously powerful this is. Again, and the Breslovers, the Hasidim, completely ignorant and clueless to what I'm revealing and teaching here in this video right now. This is crazy. Okay, let's move on to the next passage. So this is a very interesting passage because he begins this passage by saying, thus it is that the vacated space surrounds the entire world, and God who encircles all worlds encircles the vacated space as well. It is therefore relevant to say he fills all worlds, the entire creation that was created within the vacant space, and also he encircles all worlds. He encircles the vacated space. In between the vacated space acts as a separation, since God, so to speak, contracted his godliness from there. So he's talking about the mystery of the Zimzum there. Then he goes on to say, now through faith, they're believing that God fills all worlds and encircles all worlds. And since he encircles all the universes, then also the vacated space itself exists by virtue of his wisdom. And in actual truth, his godliness is surely in that place, just that it is impossible to comprehend this and to find God there as explained above. They accordingly prevail over all the wisdoms, questions, and heresies that stem from the vacated space. They know that it is surely impossible to find an answer for these heresies, because if one would find an answer for them, example, would find God in them, then there would be no vacated space and the creation would not have come into existence. Okay. Now, this is very interesting because, again, in the other passage here, he also says, this is why the Jews are called Ivrim, Hebrews, because with their faith, Uvrim, they prevail over all the wisdoms and even the pseudo-wisdoms. Example, the second heresy, which stems from the vacated space. Okay, so this is very interesting because here he is equating very telestically the vacated space or the cavity within the Zimzum with heresy or the Sitra Achra. Okay, the Sitra Achra, he's equating the Sitra Achra with the vacated space within the Zimzum. Now, why is this interesting? Because nowhere in the entire Lurianic Kabbalah is the vacated space equated with the Sitra Achra. Nowhere. There's only one book that I know of. It's an extremely, extremely esoteric Lurianic text that isn't really well known, that I'm in possession of, that does hint at the cavity being part of the Sitra Achra. The highest, most sublime mysteries of the Lurianic Kabbalah are revealed in this book. This is the only book that reveals the highest mysteries of the Lurianic Kabbalah that practically not a lot of people are aware of. It's only when you enter the Shabbathian domain that this is revealed. This mystery of equating the cavity with the Sitra Achra is explicitly revealed in Sefer HaBriah, which is the magnus opus of Nathan of Gaza. So it's Nathan of Gaza who reached the highest levels of the Lurianic Kabbalah. I think he was the first Grandmaster to reach the highest levels of the Lurianic Kabbalah and began to reveal those mysteries in his books. And in Sefer HaBriah, on page 9, that is where he explicitly starts to equate the cavity with the Sitra Achra. And so this is another proof that Rav Nachman was a Shabbathian, that he was studying he had access to and was studying these very esoteric Shabbathian texts, because this equation here that he's pointing out here is completely Shabbathian and is only fully explicitly revealed in the esoteric Shabbathian text. So this is a really, really sublime proof, and another super sublime proof and seal. So I've already revealed about, I think, 6 or so very ridiculously sublime esoteric proofs and seals that Rab Nachman was a Shabbatanian and Frankist. Now I want to reveal some more. So another very interesting thing is that Rab Nachman is referred to by 2 titles. The first one being the Hebrew letters Resh Nun, or the Ran. Okay, so he's referred to as the Ran with the Hebrew letters Resh Nun, and he was also referred to as Moharan. Okay, now that is interesting because those 2 titles that are used to refer to Rab Nachman are the same exact titles that were used to refer to Nathan of Gaza. So Moharan, the title Moharan and the title Ran, the very first time that those titles were ever used were used to refer to Rab Nathan of Gaza. So it's very, very interesting that Rab Nachman took on these 2 titles. Why would he take on the same exact titles that that adorned Rab Nathan of Gaza? Why? Because Rab Nachman was a student of Rab Nathan of Gaza. He read and mastered the writings of Nathan of Gaza, as this passage here proves and reveals. Okay? But let's go even deeper here. What is not known is what is the source of the Tikkun HaKlali. One of the most famous things that Rab Nachman is known for is his Tikkun HaKlali, which is a prayer to rectify and atone for wasting of seed. Okay? Where did this prayer come from? Well, only the Grandmasters know that Tikkun HaKlali's original source was Rab Nathan of Gaza. Rab Nathan of Gaza was the very first Rab, the first ever person to come up with that phrase, Tikkun HaKlali. The very first time that phrase has been ever used was with Rab Nathan of Gaza. He was the first person that came up with that phrase, to Tikkun HaKlali, and explained its mystery. This is a fact known by all true Grandmasters. So the fact that Rab Nachman came up with this prayer called Tikkun HaKlali is proof that he was a Shabbatanian, because Tikkun HaKlali is a completely Shabbatanian concept and prayer that Rab Nathan of Gaza came up with. Rab Nathan of Gaza was the first person that came up with a prayer called Tikkun HaKlali that was meant to atone for wasting of seed and was composed of several psalms. The only difference is that Rab Nachman changed the psalms. Rab Nathan of Gaza had certain psalms that composed his Tikkun HaKlali. Rab Nachman came on the scene, stole everything from Rab Nathan of Gaza, and the only thing he changed was the psalms that are used for the prayer. That's the only difference. Now you can begin to understand why a bunch of Hasidic Rabbanan began to accuse Rab Nachman of being a Shabbatanian, because his teachings stem and come out of Frankist and Shabbatanian sources. Okay, now I want to read to you a very powerful passage in a very esoteric document from Nathan of Gaza. So I'm going to read to you right now is a very, very esoteric passage from an extremely esoteric document from Rab Nathan of Gaza that only a handful of people possess. And in this passage, this is what Nathan of Gaza says, referring to his prayer called the Tikkun HaKlali, which he was the first person to come up with. He said, "A person who wants to correct himself must first rectify the flaw that he has in the Holy Covenant, which has a very severe punishment. And whoever has flawed the Holy Covenant has also flawed his mind, as the seed comes from there. And he also flaws the body, since the seed exists through the body through the spinal cord. Thus the flaw affects the soul, spirit, and soul, and the foundation is complete correction, because when a person wants to correct himself, he must first rectify the flaw of the Holy Covenant as mentioned, and thereby correct other flaws that depend on God, which emanate from the foundation, from the mind. Therefore, one must also correct the mind to achieve complete correction, or Tikkun HaKlali. Thus, these 2 aspects constitute Tikkun HaKlali. Okay, Tikkun HaKlali. So, this is Nathan of Gaza. Do you see how ridiculously genius and powerful Nathan of Gaza is? How fucking stupid do you have to be to reject the intent of Gaza? You have to be, I mean, if you know, all these Jews that reject the intent of Gaza completely display their absolute stupidity, ignorance, and foolishness. Okay? So again, to repeat, Nathan of Gaza was the very first Jew to ever come up with the whole concept and phrase of Tikkun HaKlali and gave all the mysteries and explanations behind it in his writings. Rab Nachman stole everything. He plagiarized and stole everything from Rab Nathan of Gaza, a Shabbathian Grandmaster, because Rab Nachman was a Shabbathian. Okay. So, that finishes that. Now, how do I get rid of this? So the next thing I want to talk about is a very powerful Frankist passage. This is probably the most explicit Frankist passage in all of his writings. And it's found in his Shikoth Hashichim LaTorah in Kaf. You can find this online. And in this passage, he brings up a verse from Mishlei 10. And this is the Hebrew here. Kesef nebachar leshon zadik, which means fine silver is chosen. He's saying here that the zadik has a chosen fine silver tongue, more or less. It's a very weird Hebrew phrase. But here in the passage that he brings up, it's duly noted that the last letters of the verse spell Frank. Okay, now you have to ask yourself, his disciples, right? They wrote this. They're transcribing the teachings of Rab Nachman. He's talking about this verse, and Rab Nachman is saying, yeah, I'm bringing up this verse. The last letter spell Frank. Why? Why would Rab Nachman bring up a verse in Proverbs where the last letters spell Frank? Now, I just published a post on my blog, I think a couple days ago, talking about this, right? In my blog post, I revealed this verse. I gave the citation here that he brings up where the last letter spells Frank. There's also another verse in the Tanakh that spells Frank. That's why I revealed that mystery there as well. But again, this is your highest proof and seal that Rab Nachman was a Grandmaster Frankist, and that here he was praising and exalting his teacher, his Mashiach, Yaakov Frank. Is there anything you want to add to this, Hadar, to the things that I've spoken to about Tikkun HaKlali and this verse?
No.
Okay.
Not that particularly.
Okay, then I want to bring up another verse here. Maybe you could speak on this verse here, Hadar.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, do you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so here...
Why don't you give the name of the passage here? Why don't you cite the passage?
Yeah, the passage here is called Inyan Machloket She'alav. It's about what he calls the Machloket. Machloket, its literal meaning is strife, but Machloket also derives from the word Chalak, smooth, which or Chelek, which means part. Those relate to Jacob, who was an Ish Chalak, right? He was a smooth man, right? It says about himself, I am a smooth man. Now, in that part of it's Likutei Moharan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he says people cannot have strife with me, because I walk in a new way in which no man has ever went since the receiving of the Torah, etc. And even though, nevertheless, it is a very, very old way, and nevertheless, it is also very new, completely new. This particular formulation, I do not know how is it earthly charged this particular formulation, but in numerous places throughout his corpus, Rabbi Nachman depicts what he calls the Der Chadash, the new way, that he is lead us, as he is the shepherd that leads the flock. The shepherd, he was working as a shepherd in his life, and it's a very strong recurrent theme in his work. The shepherd who leads the flock, he leads the flock in the way, right? and the way is understood as a function of going, right? Walking. And there's an entire mystery to the mystery of walking that Rabbi Nachman discusses in numerous other places in the book. But the point is that it's just one among many places throughout his corpus where he is reformulating concepts that already appear in the New Testament, and they appear for the first time in the New Testament. Right? Jesus says to his disciples in John 14, tells them about the way, right? And then he says, I am the truth, I am the way, I am the life, etc. No one gets to the Father besides me. And he talks to them about the way, which is to be walked with the feet, right? The feet that he washes the feet of his disciples, of his apostles. That is those feet are the organs with which the walking is done. And there's an entire.
No, go ahead, Hunter.
There's an entire mystery to the feet. Also, if you look into other places where Rabbi Nachman discusses way, also discusses the mystery of the feet, right? For example, it is written Reglei Odot Mavet, right? Her feet descend to death, right? In the book of Reglei Odot Mavet. Proverbs, yeah. And so he understands that you need to walk throughout death in your path in your new way, essentially. You need to walk through death, and also the Gemara Shav connects that verse to the mystery of Dmut, right? Image or similitude. The similitude of divine is called Dmut, which is broken down into Dalet Mavet, 4 deaths. Those 4 deaths reflect the four legs that walk through the 4 deaths. And the 4 legs are the 4 legs of the seat of glory, right? And also 4 times leg equals the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? That's from the Gemara of 12. Now, Rabbi Nachman talks to you in other places. Maybe you could search for it. It's in a Rabbenu book. There's a search function, right? You can search regel or regline or something of that sort, and it would lead you to the part where he discusses the mystery of the feet, but also something that is remarkable is that Rabbi Nachman says about himself, I'm taking you on a way that no one has ever trodden upon. That means that it is not a conventional way. It is a way that entails setting out of the conventional rabbinical lawfulness. You know, so it has to do with an exteriorization and setting out from this structural domain of Judaism. So in some manner, he's telling you, I'm taking you with me in the way, and it is very difficult to walk that way because it is not what has been decreed to you in the laws of Moses. This is a way that entails going out of this world onto the place that is among the many mentions of the Father in the Garden of Eden. This is what is understood here, but this particular formulation of the mystery is a little bit, it's not elaborate enough as far as I'm concerned. If you show me other references to the way, I could elaborate further. I also want to talk about the mystery of the vacated space. Okay?
Well, hold on, Hunter, before we get to the vacated space. So the point here is that this formulation here is a very powerful Gnostic Christian Frankist formulation, because if you read, and by the way, those are some very, very powerful points that you raised, Hadar, so thank you for that. But if you read the words of Jakob Frank, the whole motif running throughout all of his magnus opus is how Jakob Frank is trying a new path. That's what he's all about. He's like, I'm going on a new path that has never been trodden before. That's the whole motif of the words of Jacob Frank is Jacob Frank treading upon a new path. That's the whole motif of the words of Jacob Frank. I'm on a new path. And it's very interesting because the early Christians referred to their movement as the way. The way, the new way, the direct Hadash, the new way, the new path. That is the way the first Christians referred to their religion or their religion as. So that's very interesting. He says a new path in the mystery of the new covenant, because Yeshua walked. He walked a new covenant, a new path. And again, as Hadar said, he's saying no one knows this path. It's a new path, so it's gonna seem strange. It's gonna seem foreign. It's gonna be very antinomian. This has there's subtones of antinomianism here, of strangeness. Okay, and that's why Rab Nachman was again considered a heretic, because he was a Christian Shabbathian Frankist, quintessentially. Okay, and this formulation is just a very sublime seal and proof of that if you have a high IQ and a high SQ to see it. So it's very powerful. Now, before I get to Hadar, one other thing I wanted to mention, and I want to go to my blog post here. Going back to the Tikkun HaKlali, right? Its original source is Shabbathian, but Rab Nachman Christianized it, and he Christianized it on top of its Shabbathian origin, because if you take the 10 Psalms of the Tikkun HaKlali and you sum them all up, you get the number 749, which is Yeshua HaMashiach. Now, you're gonna tell me that Rab Nachman didn't know this, that he didn't purposefully do it this way? He didn't purposefully have all the Psalms add up to 749, which is Yeshua HaMashiach. I mean, come on. I mean, so it's been duly noted by many Kabbalists, many Christian Kabbalists, many Catholics who study Rab Nachman, that there's like a lot of Catholic aspects to a lot of his teachings. You can find Catholic aspects encrypted and encoded in a lot of his teachings in Likutei Moharan, but that's a matter for another video that would take too long to do, so we won't get into that. But go ahead, Hadar. You can go ahead and speak on the cavity that you said you wanted to speak on.
Yeah, sure. So if you read the part, I think it's Torah 64, right, in the Likutei Moharan, that's where he talks about the cavity or the vacant space. And something that is unique about it is that he understands that vacuum as encircling our world. So our world is filled, and there's a circumference or a coat that covers this world, and it is a cavity. It is vacant. Now, what Rabbi Nachman says to you in that part is that wisdom derives of the vacant space, the cavity. Well, this world has nothing to do with the thought or wisdom. It is more to do with words, which are, according to what he says, there are sculptures of the way in which thought, the seed of thought, is being sculpted through the mouth, through the teeth, through the tongue, the throat. We sculpt our thoughts and our spirit and our seeds into words. Words are essentially more processed thoughts. Now, what Rabbi Nachman says is that in that part, he tells you that there is a great merit and great virtue of being silent, because when you are silent, you retreat off the production of words and remain within the domain of wisdom, which is just thought that hasn't yet found its expression. Now, what he says there is very interesting, because he says to you there, he comments on the part in the Talmud in Menachot 29, where Moses goes up in Mount Sinai and he sees Rabbi Akiva, his corpse being measured by Roman soldiers. Then Moses asks, "What's the point of this?" He asks from the Lord, and the Lord says to him, "Shut up! This is what I thought." this is what was decreed by my thought. And Rabbi Nachman comments on that it is important to shut up because the thought is superior to the speech. He says that to you explicitly. The thought is superior to the speech. So what we see here is that first of all, he says to you that the heresies or the wisdoms are superior to the speeches and the words of the Torah. This is one thing that he said to you there, implicitly. But also he also tells you that the quality is in being silent. And that is opposed to the speech, and we know that the archetype of speech is Jacob, the patriarch, right? The voice is the voice of Jacob. When Rabbi Nachman tells you to be silent, he tells you to be, again, antitypical to Jacob. Another thing we know, it's a great mystery, but we know that from the Zohar, that the power of the serpent is in his words, right? In the words of his mouth. This is what's written in the Zohar. And we understand that Rabbi Nachman telling you to be silent, it's telling you to retreat from the speechful characteristic of the serpent.
Yes, indeed, Hadar. That's great. Are you done, Hadar? Or?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, yeah, that's great. It's very powerful stuff there, Hadar, that you said. You went really deep there. So I want to conclude now by reading some notes that I compiled on the last 2 pages of Yehuda Leib's paper. So, Yehuda Leib briefly comments and, notes other parallels, beginning with those between Rab Nachman and Jacob Frank, who it seems to me Rab Nachman was greatly influenced by. Perhaps in his youth, during his years of seclusion, and you can see Chaya Moharan regarding his place of residence and travels, Siman 4 and 7, he encountered Frankists who remained within Judaism, who were numerous in the region of Podolia. For these parallels, I rely on passages from Divrei Ha'adon, the words of the Master by Jacob Frank, which Yehuda Leib read in the manuscript form. So, in the words of Jacob Frank, it is full of stories that in character resemble the tales of Rab Nachman. For example, the motif of the exchange of sons and the separation of a boy and a girl destined for each other, only for everything to ultimately be restored to its proper order. You can see note 1021 in the words of Jacob Frank, and compare it to the story of the king's son and the maid's son, and the story of the beggar and the wealthy man in Rab Nachman's tales. Similarly, there is a frequent occurrence of the theme of the princess, the lost maiden, as in the story of the lost princess, and Hasatan is often depicted as an old man in the words of Jacob Frank, like in 1016 and 1288. And so in Nachman's writings, of course, the old man is identified with the grandfather from Shpola, who was the arch nemesis of Rab Nachman. And in the book, the words of Jacob Frank, it is filled with an apocalyptic vision of the rectification and clarification of the world through war and terrible bloodshed. And this is also found in the writings of Rab Nachman, specifically in Likutei Moharan, Part 1, Siman 260. So already here, we already have numerous parallels and equations between the words of Jacob Frank and the writings of Rab Nachman. At times, we find precise parallels in the behaviors of the two figures. Jacob Frank in his childhood used to play war games with the boys, imitating the war that was taking place in the world at that time. Some of the boys took the role of the Russians and some the role of their enemies, the Turks. Jacob Frank attributed significance to this and mentioned it in his words of Jacob Frank in note 1235. Similarly, Rab Nachman, when he was in Istanbul on his way to the land of Israel during Napoleon's invasion of the land in 1799, played that same game with special intent, where one person played the Turks and another Rab Nachman played Napoleon. This is found in Shivkei Haran regarding his journey to the land of Israel in Siman 12. The matter of Napoleon greatly occupied him. Even the story of the king's son and the maid's son who were switched was told because of the matter of Napoleon. The maid's son who rose to kingship, as explained in Chaya Moharan, tales related to the stories in Siman 2. And he also notes the fondness both had for the song Akdamot, the song and Shavuot. A verse from the song is quoted in Yaakov Frank's, the words of Yaakov Frank in Note 143. And Rav Nachman spoke highly of the song in Sichot Haran, Siman 256. Again, more parallels between the lives of Yaakov Frank and Rav Nachman and the writings as well. A most precise and impressive parallel is found in Rav Nachman's famous story about the king's son who went mad and believed himself to be the rooster sitting under the table, and who was eventually cured by a man who also pretended to be a rooster and sat with him, slowly changing his behavior to that of a normal person, saying that a rooster could also act this way. This is in Kochve, or Section Stories and Parables of Our Rabbi, Jerusalem, 1972, pages 26 to 27. This very same story is also found in the words of Yaakov Frank in 986, and unless I find a common source for both, such as in Eastern European folklore, you have to assume that Rav Nachman's source was Yaakov Frank. The moral in Rav Nachman's version, of course, is the descent of the righteous to the wicked to correct them through imitation. Whereas for Yaakov Frank, the intent was different. He likely referred to the Torah commandments that he still had to observe because of his mad followers. You could, of course, see words of Yaakov Frank, Siman 1283. I highlighted this exact equation in one of my videos that I did long ago, a number of years ago, noting this, noting how Rav Nachman, again, stole this story from Yaakov Frank. So again, already I have cited a number of very sublime seals and proofs, proving indubitably that Rav Nachman stole and plagiarized a lot of his material from not just from the Shabbathian Rav Nathan of Gaza, but Hamashiach Yaakov Frank as well. Okay. In several matters, one may also detect the influence of Nathan of Gaza on Rav Nachman, such as in the speculations on the demonic nature of the vacant space, which I revealed here, which is the source of heresies. This is on Nathan of Gaza, Sefer HaBriah in folio 9. And I showed you the passage in Likutei Moharan, part 1, Torah 64, which I went through. As well as in the Tikkun HaKlali. In this context, one might also take into account the shared titles between the two, Botzina Kadisha Moharan, or Haran, which I also have alluded to. And there is even a work by Nathan of Gaza called Likutei Haran. And its photocopy is in the Jerusalem Institute. My friend Abraham Isaac Arthur Green also pointed out to me the words of Joseph Pohl in his parody on the Breslov writings, written during the generation of Nathan of Breslov. And here is what he wrote. It is known that in all things the Holy One, blessed he be, created one thing opposite the other. Therefore, against Nathan of Gaza, he created this Nathan of Breslov. Anyways, that's what this Hasidic master may teach, but it doesn't matter. The facts are that we see a lot of plagiarization by Rav Nachman of Nathan of Gaza. A reincarnation of Nathan the prophet, and he was also a part of the soul of Nathan of Gaza to rectify what was corrupted in this time. And just as Nathan of Gaza revealed things from the side of impurity, he will reveal things of holiness. That's again a continuation of what this ascetic master had to say. The story of the lost princess can be compared to a similar parable from a Shabbathian source, which is the letter of Magen Abraham from the West, which was edited by Gershom Sholov in Kobetz Al Yad, Volume 2, 1936, page 139. And the question of its authorship, see my book, The Secret of the Shabbathian Belief. And there the king sends his servant to check on the well-being of his fiancée who was in captivity. This story may also remind us of the song Melizelda, the Emperor's Daughter, that Shabbatai Zvi used to sing, with similar mystical enchantments related to the Shekinah. See Gershom Sholem, Shabbatai Zvi. Incidentally, the very use of a Gentile song for Kabbalistic purposes strongly resembles the custom of the Hasidim. So again, these are things that Yehuda Leibs noted in the last 2 pages of his book, which I transcribed here, which again show numerous parallels and equations between Rav Nachman's writings and Shabbathian and Frankist sources. Again, proving that Rav Nachman, as I continually have repeatedly said, was a Grandmaster Christian Shabbathian Frankist. Salah. I've revealed here numerous proofs and seals for anyone who has eyes to see, who has a reasonable IQ and SQ to see and understand. Okay, again, also proving the vast stupidity, ignorance, and foolishness of the religious Jews and Kabbalists at large. Okay, and so that concludes this video. Is there anything you would like to conclude with, Hadar, before we end this?
No, I think you talked well.
Okay, beautiful. All right. So there you have it, guys. In conclusion, indubitable, explicit evidence that Reb Nachman was indeed, amen amen, a Christian Shabbathian Frankist of the highest order. Salah. Okay, shalom, everyone.